All right, so first thing we're going to do, download this workbook right here. This will be kind of common. Quite often we'll begin by downloading something that we're going to work on. So go ahead and download Client Schedule from Learning Suite. Just be an Excel workbook. And then get that down and open it up, and we'll begin working with VBA. So VBA is the name of a programming language. The initials stand for Visual Basic for Applications. There's a language called Visual Basic. It's a full-blown programming development environment. And you can develop whatever you want, standalone applications. And it's a very close cousin to VBA, but here's the big difference for VBA. For VBA, when you write a program, it has to live inside some other host application. You're not going to make an executable program with VBA that's just going to run by itself. You'll say, okay, here's a program that's going to run inside of Excel. So you take Excel, you take the program I wrote in VBA, you can do great things. You take Word and the program that I wrote in VBA, you can do great things. Access, PowerPoint, Visio, there's a handful of others that you can automate using VBA. And so you will always, everything that we develop here is going to run in some environment, largely Excel. In fact, I don't think we're going to do anything besides Excel in this class. I've downloaded this, and so that's what we're going to do. Now, it turns out macros have been disabled. Excel assignment, enable content. So it turns out that a macro, you've heard the term macro before? I'm not even sure why it's called a macro. It's a strange thing to call it. It's a little program. The very early days of macros were just recorded keystrokes. Everything, it was before we even had a mouse on the computer. Everything we did by keystrokes. In fact, the very early days, what was the first spreadsheet program? Called SuperCalc or VisiCalc, I forget. One of those two was the first one. And it was amazing. It was the 1970s. It didn't take much to impress us back then. What did it have? It had rows, it had columns, and you could put a formula in the cell that would update automatically based on the value of a present cell. That was it. And it was like, whoa, it's pretty powerful stuff. Pretty soon we realized, wow, we find ourselves doing exactly the same keystrokes over and over again. And someone said, wouldn't it be great if we could just record these? And so they said, yeah. And this is literally how it used to work. You pick a cell, and say I want to record a macro, you'd start doing something, and the keystrokes would just go starting at that cell and going down. You just record the keystrokes. You press A, then you press return, and then you pressed tab, and it would just record all of these. And then you can say, I want to play back some keystrokes, and you put your cursor or the active cell where you want it to be. You say, play back that macro, and it would just go through those strokes. Things got a little bit confusing when we got the mouse, because it was now kind of hard to record activities that you did with the mouse. So in 1995, how old were you in 1995? When you were 3, Microsoft said, listen, this whole thing of recording macros as keystrokes is out, and instead, we're going to record what you do, the activities that you do, we're going to record it in a programming language that you can then edit. And what was the first language they used? Today we're learning Visual Basic for Applications. What was their very first language for macros? Basic. Visual Basic for Applications. It's exactly the same language. So it's amazing that the language has stayed the same for this long. Microsoft's tried a couple of times to kill it, to go in a different direction, and they've given up. They're like, okay, we're going to keep it going forward. And so one of the reasons that learning, in fact, let's just find this. How many of you by now are saying, I have never programmed in any computer programming language before? So, okay, so this class is for you. And I see, a bunch of my information systems students are going, I'm just here because it's going to be a pretty easy A for me, and I got to have credits to graduate. And so, but here's the reason that I think that learning to program in VBA and Excel is the best place to start, or a really great place to start, is because you can be really powerful very quickly. Because you're not just starting with a blank page. You have a thing called a macro recorder. You just say, you know what? I want to record myself doing something, and it's going to write the program for you. Now, it turns out it's not going to be that great at writing the program, so we'll want to be doing some modifications to it, but that's the good thing. Anytime you say, in fact, in any other programming language, you say, I have no idea how to do something I want to do. What are you going to do? Google, you're going to search it. And in fact, you have a little disadvantage if you're experienced programming, because that is so wired into you. Gosh, I don't know how to do this. How am I going to do it? I'm going to Google it. Because there's an easier way in Excel. What is it? Record it. I don't know how to do that. Just record yourself doing it. It'll show you how to do it. And so that's wonderful. Question?
I just want to share an experience.
An experience.
So I'm an IS major too, and I just got married this last summer. And to get housing on campus, it goes within 10 seconds. but knowing how to use a macro, I was able to write a script that just did it for me and got me a housing contract. So learning stuff like this also gives you like things that go on pre-order, like those new Nintendos that go in like 10 seconds on those websites. So.
Yeah, in fact, I will show you how to interact with password-protected websites kind of automatically. A program that goes and does that. In fact, a guy who graduated, just barely graduated this past April, he was some kind of crazy musician. I'm trying to remember his name. He's graduated. Why would I remember his name? Anyway, so he would make money by looking for different kinds of instruments for sale on KSL. And then he'd go, oh, that's a good deal. I know I can sell that for more than that. And then he would buy it. He'd make $200 or $300 by selling it under the right market. So he wrote it for a project for the class. He wrote a macro. It's kind of hard to call it a macro because it's really sophisticated. But that would just go like every 5 minutes and check KSL for certain words and see what there was. And if something came in that matched the keywords he was looking for, it would send him a text message. And then I don't think it was sophisticated enough for him to respond to the text message and have it purchased for him, but he would go, oh, okay, I'll have to bring up KSL and purchase it. So he says, I got this text message, and it was a saxophone that I knew, it was only $6,000 saxophone, and I knew it was worth at least $20,000. And so within just a few minutes of it being listed, he got a text message, he bought it, and sold it later that week, for like $18,000. Cleared $12,000 on that, and I thought, you have some kind of percentage worked in. So yeah, no, you're absolutely right. You can, being able to automate things, it's not just that it's going to save your work, make your work go better. This could be a money-making opportunity for some of you. Okay, the first thing we've got to do is we have to get the developer tab. All the tools that we need for working with VBA are on the developer tab. File, home, insert, draw. I have no developer tab. What's wrong? Oh, maybe I've got some student version of Excel. No, there's only one version of Excel. It's not like there's some crippled version. It turns out that there is so much raw power available with VBA that Microsoft does not want mere mortals having access to it. And the truth is, you don't want my mother fiddling around with the developer tab. And so it's invisible by default. If you can't figure out how to show the developer tab, you don't belong in VBA at all. I think that's the idea. So I'm going to show you how to do it. Choose File, and then come down to Options. File Options. And then, once that Options comes up, over on the left, we've got this thing called Customize Ribbon right here. Under Customize Ribbon, you can, the developer tab is not checked by default. We'll check it, and we'll say, okay, that developer tab will show up. Turns out you can uncheck the Home tab. I'm not sure why you would ever do that. The Home tab's too pesky. It's like, it's getting in my way.
Okay.
Of course, maybe your roommate, go back to that domestic violence thing, maybe your roommate left his computer on, and you thought, it's April Fool's Day, I'll uncheck his Home tab and see how he likes that. Probably shouldn't do that. That would be a sin. You'd have to repent. Of course, I do encourage repentance, so I don't know. All right. So we got the developer tab. So now that developer tab is showing, here's where we have the tools that we need to be able to do great and wonderful things with VBA. We're going to begin with recording a macro. So, in fact, there's a whole lot of folks out there who learn to record macros, but they never learn to really get in and modify it. And they can still do some pretty good things. So what we're going to do today is we're going to see how we can record a macro that might be a little bit useful, and then we're going to modify it to clean it up, and I'm sure we'll make it more useful, but we're going to go through and we're going to use the code that it records to be able to start to talk about some of the concepts in the class. All right, so here's what we're going to do. Is before we start recording, we've got this sheet here that's just got some data, and there's nothing too critical about this data. It's just something for us to work with. Here's we're not starting with a blank sheet. I'm going to start by copying this sheet. So Control, click, and drag, and I'll copy that. I just want to keep one of these pristine because we're going to do several things to this, and it might be nice to have the original one there so that we can go back and work with it. It doesn't really matter what the name of the sheet is, sheet 1, 2, the old 1, 2 here, whatever that's. Okay. So now I'm going to click on Record Macros. Can you see that okay up there? Oh, we itty bitty. Windows Plus. some kind of, there we go, the magnify. Okay, so I've got record macro here. When I click on record macro, it's going to come up here and say, all right, you're going to record a macro. First of all, you got to give it a name. So the name for the macro can be any, it's got to start with a letter. It's got to be letters, numbers, and the underscore character. That's the only thing you've got to work with. You can't put a hyphen in it. You can't put a space in it. I'm going to call it, I'll just call it format, F-O-R-M-A-T. Format page. Format page. Maybe I'll give it a shortcut key for P, for page. Oh, now the shortcut key is what? Control P. Control P. That sounds vaguely familiar. What does Control P do? Not anymore, it doesn't. Now Control P runs this macro. Do you see why you don't want my mom playing with this? You gotta, like override the default functionality that just comes with Excel out of the box. Like a week ago, I thought, I wonder which characters or which keystrokes are not already used. So like I went through and looked a bunch up, and then I tried the ones that weren't listed there. There's only two, J and M. Every other keystroke means something. Control Q, I don't know what it means, but it means something. Control N, literally J and M are the only other ones. And there are some that are like Control plus Shift plus something, but there's a lot fewer of those. In fact, I don't think I ever use those. So by putting a capital P in, it'll be O. To invoke, it's the Control plus Shift plus P. I feel a lot safer with that. Turns out there's several places I can choose. There's actually 3 places I can choose to store the workbook. Let me just go over these really briefly. Store this macro. Number 1 is I can store it right here in this workbook. And that's how we're almost always going to do it in this class. In fact, that's probably how we're always going to do it in this class. So this macro is going to be a whole set of instructions. Where's it going to go? It's going to go in this workbook. So if this workbook goes somewhere else, those instructions go with it. Next place I can put it is this thing, well, a new workbook. It'll record it into a brand new workbook. So instead of putting it in this one, it'll just make a new one and put it in there. But the other one that's really interesting is the personal macro workbook. So if I record this into the personal macro workbook, then it's going to put it into a workbook called personal.xlsb. That's the name of the workbook. Once I've recorded a macro into the personal macro workbook, as soon as I do that the first time, it's going to create that workbook, and then every time from now on until the second coming, whenever Excel opens, it's going to open that workbook too. It'll open up personal.xlsb. The reason that it does, and it'll hide, it'll be open and hidden. So here's the idea. I can run any macro from any workbook as long as the workbook's open. So the idea for the personal macro workbook is to say, you know, I'm going to be building something, a macro, that I want to be able to run on any workbook. I want it tied to this machine, not tied to a particular workbook. So whatever workbook I have open, I want to be able to run this macro on it. And so depending on the kind of work you do, sometimes people go, yeah, I have a lot of stuff in my personal macro workbook. You know, it's like customizing Excel to do great and wonderful things with a couple of keystrokes, and then just go crazy. And so anything you put in the personal macro workbook, the idea is it's always available to you wherever you go. We're going to go ahead and leave this right here in this workbook. And then we can put some description, format, and employee sheet. Okay, now as soon as I say okay, I've got to be careful now because everything I do now is being recorded. Now, the truth is, even before I say okay, everything I do is being recorded in heaven. But now, it's being recorded in Excel, too. Be careful about what I'm doing. So here's what I'd like to do with this. So let's just suppose that we get some download of some employee information, comes out of our ERP system or comes from some web page that our company subscribes to, and it could be some kind of employee report. And when it comes, it's just data, and we need to format it a certain way. And so that's what I'd like to do. So I'm going to start off here by selecting F1. And it is just my first activity. It just recorded, select F1. And we'll take a look at the code that it generates to do that. And I'm going to go ahead and say I want to put some hours across here. Let's say I want to put in, say, starting at 8 o'clock. Put an 8 o'clock here. And then I'm just going to drag this over by grabbing the little handle in the bottom right-hand corner. Then it should kind of count up as I drag that across. I'll drag it up to, I don't know, let's see, 16, kind of end of the day. Column Q should be 18, 19. It's like 7 o'clock. It's probably longer than I want to work, but that'll do okay. Okay, so I've recorded that, and it recorded some activity for that particular action. We'll take a look at the code here as we go. Let's go ahead and, I'm not a big fan of this military time thing here. It's like having to do math in my mind to look at what time it is I'm not after that. So I'm going to format this. Let's see, I can probably right-click and choose Format Cells. And I'll just make this like AM, PM time. So time, and there we go, 1:30 PM. That's what I'm after. And OK. All right, so it's now formatted that like time. That looks pretty good. I think I'd also like to put a grid around this. So, how do I select like the whole set of contiguous data? Do you know what keystroke it is? It would say, I just want to automatically just select everything that's here. Okay, now Control, Control A used to do the whole worksheet. Now I think it does do that contiguous thing. That's right. Let's try that. Control Star does it as well. That's the way we've done it for years. Let's try Control A. I'm not quite sure how this, I'm going to do Control Star, because I'm not quite sure how that's going to record. I like Control Star, and that will then record something that says, hey, let's get the contiguous data. And now I'm just going to put on, let's see, come back to my Home tab. Thankfully, no one unchecked it for me. And I'm going to come here and say I want all borders. Some borders around it. That looks pretty good. And now I'm going to select A1. You with me? Control Star did that whole thing. And then I did, what is it? I don't even know how to call this. This little drop down up here, I said you put all the borders on it. Now I've selected A1, and I'm going to do Control Shift right arrow, which should just highlight the contiguous data across the top. Control Shift right arrow will just go until we run out of data and select that. And I'm going to put that header into a different color, maybe kind of a light blue, and I will make it bold. I'm almost done. I'm just going to click here on F2 to kind of get my active cell to the place that I know I'm going to need to be for whatever my next activity is. Okay. So I just kind of record myself doing a bunch of stuff. I'm going to stop recording now. So back on my Developer tab, the button that used to be Record Macro now says Stop Recording. Click on Stop Recording. Very important to remember stop recording. One day, kind of the early days of me working with VBA, I was recording some macro, and my wife called me like in the middle of the macro. She just called. I'm like, I'm not recording a macro now, are you? I mean, I could call back later. Some problem with the plumber that was trying to fix something, I don't know. Anyway, I hung up, and I totally forgot I was recording a macro. What was I doing? I don't remember. I got back. Like for an hour, I worked in Excel, not realizing I was recording everything I did. It was like thousands and thousands of lines of code. I felt so productive that day. I can like replay that whole day. What if I can charge twice for it? Okay, I did this once. You paid me once for this. Won't come in tomorrow. I'll just play the map. Okay, so now let me go ahead and I'm going to copy that page again. So I'll copy this sheet again. Control, click. And then on this, so here's my, I've copied that blank sheet again, and so now I've got unformatted page. The whole idea now is I should be able to come back to my list of macros, and there's a couple different ways I can run the macro. Oh, I put a hotkey on it, didn't I? I could press Control-Shift-P. Or I could come up here to my list of macros, and I could find the one, there's already one called Make Schedule in this. We may run that macro, we may not. But here's Format Page. So I could run that from here. Let me just show you one more place that I can get to it. And that is, even if the Developer tab is not showing, on the View tab, there is a list of macros here. So that's always there. So if there's macros in the workbook and the Developer tab is not available, you can still get to the list of macros here. And so I'm just going to run that, and hopefully it'll just format this page just exactly the same the other one was. Yeah. So it did it. So now, with this particular macro, if I got this kind of download, I had to deal with it once a week or once a month or whatever, press Control-Shift-P, run that macro, and it formats the way I want it. Of course, this is a pretty simple amount of formatting. We could have done a lot more. I didn't want to bury you on your first day of code. You ready to look at the code? So that's really chapter 1. It's just recording a macro and playing it back. We're going to spend some time now with the content from chapter 3, and we'll come back to chapter 2 when we get together on Monday. So chapter 3 is now really starting to understand this stuff that we recorded. So I'm going to come to the Developer tab, and I'm going to click on Visual Basic over here. I'm glad you're all seated, because one poor student, I clicked on the Visual Basic tab, and the student let out an audible gasp. Excel, now going to look like you've never seen it before. Visual Basic, and then, oh my gosh, what have I done? It comes up, Maximize. Let's see, I'm going to get out of this. Maybe I'll leave myself zoomed in. But have no fear. Your Excel is still there. It's just a different window. I'm going to use. So one of the ways to kind of go back and forth is Alt-Tab. I'm always still kind of surprised at how many students have gone through their whole life with working with Windows and never knew that you could switch back and forth between applications by Alt-Tab. Hold down the Alt key and tap the Tab key. That'll take you back and forth. Incidentally, if you're in Excel and VBA window is not even open yet, Alt F11 will open it. And it will also toggle you back and forth. So Alt F11 is kind of a handy window as well. All right, so here then is the code that we just recorded. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to zoom out. Can you see that okay? I'm just kidding, I know you can't. Come to Options, and I'm just going to try to zoom in here. I'm trying a new computer this year because the one I had last time, it was made by Microsoft. This part I didn't like to do at all. I'm going to choose a different font here. I'm going to do Microsoft Sans Serif. Western 16, maybe I'll go to like 24. That should be 20 big. Can you see that okay in the back? Should I go bigger? Back row?
A little bigger.
A little bigger? What if I go type it in here for you too? That might be as big as I can go. That's a pity. Okay, well, hopefully you can follow along with you. So, with what you record. So first thing to realize is that when I record a macro, it's going to put it in what's referred to as a sub procedure. And so it begins with the keyword sub, and we can see the name of the macro is up there. Sub, and the name of the macro. It ends, we scroll down here, it ends with end sub. And so everything between, let's make schedule, what's wrong? I got to come to module 2. Sorry, that's one that was there before we started. So over here on the left, I've got a list of modules, and it just, every time I start recording again, it's going to start by making a new module. So I'm going to come to module 2. Here's format page. This is the one that we just created. So format page. Starts with sub, format page. We then have comments. Anytime I put a single quote, that makes a comment. It says, hey, this is not an instruction for the computer to figure out. It's just a note to some programmer. And so, hey, in case you missed it, one line above, this is the format page macro. You might have missed that here, so we've got that here in a comment. Now here's the comment that I typed in, and it recorded the shortcut key that was bound to this one that was recorded. I'll try to go bigger one more time. I think I should at least be able to choose 24. Okay, so here then is the first line of executable code that we recorded. And that's the first thing we did. We clicked on F1. This is the way the language works. It's going to start by identifying something. In fact, in the programming lingo that we're going to get familiar with, that's an object. Oh. Object-oriented programming was actually invented in the 1960s, but it wasn't until the 1980s that it really started to catch on. And so in the early 90s, when I was a student here, I took my first class in object-oriented programming. And I was 3/4 of the way through the class before I had this realization, we're almost done with this class, and I still don't really know what an object is. But you're in luck today because I'm going to tell you what an object is. This is the first day of class. I'm going to tell you. Are you ready? An object is a thing. That's it. It's some thing that I can manipulate through code. That really is all it is. Object is a thing. Question?
So, is there a list somewhere in the book or that you have on Learning Suite that tells us what all those tools are in VBA, like range, selection, loop?
Yeah. You want to see it? Well, you asked for them all. If you hit F2 on your keyboard, it'll change the brightness of your screen. Function F2, on the other hand, will bring up what's called the object browser. The book talks about the object browser. In fact, I think it talks about it in chapter 3. And so there's a lot to deal with here. Maybe you're hoping for a list of maybe not all of them, but like the most important ones.
Yeah.
That'd be a really good thing to have. Yeah, I don't have that. Maybe the midterm study guide would get you partway there, because I talked about the ones at least that I want you to know for that. So here's the way the language works. It's going to refer to some object. Somehow. There's lots of different ways to refer to an object. There can be a dozen different ways that I can refer to that particular cell F1. There really are a bunch of ways that I can get there. That's one of them. And then a dot. And then after the dot, I'm going to do something with that object. There's two main things that I'm going to work with. It might be a property of the object. So objects have properties. A property is just a value that describes the way the object is. So think what might be a property of F1. Can you imagine what a property of F1 might be?
Font color.
The font. Yeah, so that is. Font is an object. It's a property of that cell. Good. What else? The row that it is, its address, the value that's in it, the formula that's in that cell. Yeah, the background color of the cell, the color of the font of the cell. Yeah. And so those are all properties. So a property is nothing more than a value that describes the way the object is. It's something that says, how is that object? If I change a property of it, if I change the formula of that cell, it changes the way that object is. It's now got a different state. It's now different than it used to be. That one property of it has changed. So like you can have a property of yourself that's changed. You cut your hair. You change the hair length property. Well, maybe I should think a different one. Lost some weight. You change the weight property. And so that's the idea. Now the second thing that I can do with an object is called a method. It's kind of a weird word, method. I'm not even sure why they call it method. Let me tell you what a method is. Probably well before the midterm, you'll be comfortable with that term method. Okay, yeah, I get it, method. A method is just, property is a value that says how the object is. Method is something the object knows how to do. So this object, well, all objects you don't necessarily have to have capabilities to be an object. You have an object with no capabilities. But a method is a capability of the object. It's something this object knows how to do. And so this cell, F1, this object, knows how to activate itself. It knows how to say, make me the active cell. And the method that we use to invoke that activity, the name for that capability is called select. So when I say object name.select, I'm sending an instruction to that object. And I'm saying, F1, select yourself. Go select yourself. This is important because this is not me saying select F1. It's not like I'm saying select and then telling Excel what to select. No. I am telling the object to select itself. I'm telling the object to make itself active. It is a capability of the object. That means that select, that term select, that method, isn't even really part of the VBA language. It's a part of that object. And so I'm invoking this functionality that's built into this object. It would be possible, we're not going to do it in this class, but it would be possible for us to define our own kinds of objects and to create new functionalities that VBA currently doesn't have. We're not extending the language, we're making an object that can do stuff in the language. And that would be a method that we're creating. And so this first line here says we are going to, we've got like 5 minutes to go in class. they do like time studies. What makes time go faster for you, slower? Time flies. If you're having fun. That's actually good. One of the things that I find most interesting is that time passes way more quickly for the presenter than for the person who's listening. That's like totally true. I thought everyone was having this great fun. No, it's just me up here. So select. Okay. So this one is what we're seeing here is a method. So this is we've identified an object. Then that now becomes the active cell. It becomes selected. Now, next statement. We're identifying some object. Which object is this? Okay, it's the active cell. Be more specific. It's F1. This is F1. How do we know? Well, we just barely, in the line before, we made that the active cell. And so now we're saying active cell. And now this then is a property. We are modifying the formula property. There's a formula, just formula. There's also a formula R1C1. We'll talk about the differences, and it turns out we could have done either one with this. And then we're setting a value of that property. Remember, a property is a value that describes the way the object is. We are changing the way this object is. What's the change? We're putting 8 o'clock into that cell. We're changing the property so that when we look at that cell, hey, it looks different than it used to. Yeah, we changed the property. We changed the formula of that cell. Now it says 8, 0, 0.
So looking at the line we're on, it says active cell. If you go down 2 lines, or even 4 lines, you're looking at range from F1 to Q1, and it says selection. What's the difference between an active cell and the selection?
Good question. In fact, we're going to get there really quick, so we'll be there shortly. So again, after that, we put that in. Then I selected F1 again. And then we said selection.autofill. So why doesn't this say, I think your question is here, why doesn't it say active cell.autofill? Probably would work just fine. In fact, we could change it and see how it does. Here's the thing you have to realize. Somebody wrote the macro recorder. The macro recorder is a program itself. Somebody wrote a program that said, hey, when this happens in Excel, record this. And there are times when I think, wow, that was a really weird way to record it. We could have done better. In fact, there are sometimes you do something great and you think, oh, I really want to see how this works. And you go to the code, it didn't record anything. The macro recorder is like, yeah, we never really thought we would want to see that. So we just had to make the recorder able to record that. Turns out it's a lot less frequent than it used to be. Like with Excel 2007, kind of a big change. There's a whole bunch of stuff. The macro recorder is like, yeah. Make a chart. I'd be thinking about when to record. Recorders will make it a chart. Sub, end sub. That's all you got. Record charts now. They're making this stuff better all the time. Okay, so we looked at a little bit lower here. Here's what we did. Now, here we're so here we're calling the autofill method. We are telling this range to autofill. We're telling F1 autofill, and then we're giving it some parameters. A little space here, and then some other information. We're saying, listen, we're going to autofill with a destination is going to be fill in this whole range. And what's the type? It's the default type. Just whatever you would normally autofill, fill across. So this tells me, hey, we might be able to do something a little more sophisticated than just what the default is. I'm not sure what other options we have there, but we can do some other things. Then we selected that whole range. Actually, I think that got selected when I did the autofill, right? I autofilled that across, and then that stayed selected, and that recorded the select. I think we could probably delete that line, and this code would still work exactly the same, because I think the autofill will select it as well. So now, when we get to this selection, this now is different than the active cell. Why? It's a multi-cell range. It's not just one cell. Now it is F1 to Q1. And we are about to change properties for all of those cells. What property are we going to change?
Number format.
We change the number format of that object. And it will actually change the number format. After this, you go to every one of those cells, and the number format will be changed. And so we can change the properties of multiple cells just by referring to the whole range and treating that like an individual object. Kind of nice. Then I did control star. And that did this. It said, hey, with whatever is currently selected, refer to the current region. That's the one that does the magic. It says, I want to refer to that whole set of contiguous cells. And then it says selected. And then we modified a whole bunch with the borders. Now, I'm going to show you this next part just, not because I want you to totally grasp the idea of what I'm about to do, But I want to drive home the fact that the macro recorder doesn't necessarily record really good code. It's going to record code that will work mostly, not always, but mostly. But here's what it does. It says, listen, we're getting rid of any diagonal borders. Did you know you can put a border diagonally through the cell? You put an X right through the cell. Those are borders. But you can do that. I didn't know that. Well, I mean, I know now. I didn't always know that. And then it says, listen, we are going to change the left border. So that whole thing that we have selected, oh, by the way, this little syntax here is interesting. It says with and with. It says I'm going to refer to some object, and I'm going to change a bunch of properties about that object. So with this object that I referred to here, we're going to change line style property, control index property, tint shade, and weight. We'll change all those properties. It's like a shorthand notation. I really wish the macro recorder didn't do this, but yes. So it says, all right, I'm going to do something with the top edge of the border. So out of all the borders, let's just think about the top edge right now. And what are we going to change? Style, color index, tint and shade, and weight. All right, now let's do the bottom edge. Same things. Left edge, same things. The inside vertical edge, same thing. Inside horizontal edge. Whatever else we have here. So watch this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to say, listen, you know what? Don't narrow it down. Instead of saying left here, I'm just going to say with the borders. I just want to do something with the borders of what's selected. Narrow it down to the first one, the left one, you can do all of them. And this now, this block right here is going to do everything that this whole block used to do. And so all these borders, right down to that range of A1 select, I'm just going to delete it. Wow, this whole thing will fit on one screen now. And it will still work. I'm going to come over here, I'll copy it one more time. I'll press Control-Shift-P. It does exactly the same thing. So a big part of what we'll do in this class, we'll record ourselves doing something to see how Excel does that, and then with what I'm teaching you about the language, we're going to see how to improve what Excel has recorded. There's homework due Monday. When is it due Monday? After class. It's due at midnight. If you want to dive in, you can do that. Let me just show you really quickly how you would get to there. I'm going to come here to Web Query. I'll follow that link. That'll take me to My Educator. I think I'm already logged in. Now it's supposed to take me to My Educator. Web Query. That link should take me to My... Well, unless I can figure out how to fix that link. It's kind of amazing. Let me just try to copy that. This should take you right to the assignment if you're logged in. All right, we're out of time. You may, if you can't figure out how to do the homework straight away, it's pretty straightforward and it's similar to how you did it if you had the Excel class. It'd be great. If you want to wait until we have it in class, we'll probably actually do it in class on Monday so you can do it. All right, folks, thanks for coming to class. I will see you on Monday. Class dismissed.
Do you need parallels or the windows to do the homework? Like the